I appreciate being invited here by the Old Dominion University. It's, like you said, my first literary festival. I've never been to one before, much less spoken at one, you know. But then everything in life as of recent has been new adventure. And I guess this counts as one of them too. I know you've heard this before, but trust me, no other speaker has meant it as much as I do when I tell you I am really happy to be here today. The theme of this year's festival is Hard Times in America. And I guess being locked up in prison for more than 4 decades certainly qualifies as hard times. But I'm always mindful that nobody kidnapped me and dragged me to prison. My own actions got me there. Too many people suffer hard times not of their own making, especially today when people are losing their jobs, losing their homes, losing everything they've acquired over a lifetime. So I keep things in perspective. I realize how blessed I am to have my freedom today, and how fortunate I was during the last quarter century of my prison experience to have acquired friends and supporters who nurtured me emotionally and opened doors for me intellectually. It's because of them, I think, that I have a story worth telling. What I tried to do in my memoir, In the Place of Justice, was to weave into the telling of my story the evolution of criminal justice and the Louisiana prison system during my 44 years in it. One remarkable man, in particular, equipped me to do that. C. Paul Phelps was the state's Director of Corrections in 1976. He was also warden of the Louisiana State Penitentiary, the largest maximum security prison in America. Phelps saw some writing I did back then for a chain of black weeklies in the South, and he saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself at the time. I'd already been assigned to the prison magazine, The Angelite, as its editor, but with a handshake, he agreed to let me practice uncensored journalism in prison. Now, understand, that was unprecedented in America, and it was at a time when the prison was basically out of control. It was called the bloodiest prison in the nation, and those were indeed hard times in my America. So for C. Paul Phelps to implement a policy of freedom from censorship, and not just for the Angelite, but for all employees and inmates, was a bold and courageous move at a very dangerous time in the prison's history. Then he mentored me in prison operations and management. So I acquired a broader perspective than either the typical inmate who sees prison only through the narrow lens of his own pain, or the guard who can never really know what it's like to be incarcerated because he can always walk out the front gate. So I hope readers will find the book educational on those subjects. I hope you will notice, too, that the world of prison you find depicted in my memoir is not the one you see in the movies. I tried to dispel some of the myths about prison in my book, to show that, yes, there is violence and brutality, but that is not the way most prisoners live. Many become better than the worst thing they've ever done. At some point, they want to find a way to live a productive or meaningful life, to the extent that opportunities are available to them. One of the worst features of many prisons today is that they do not provide inmates outlets for constructive living or avenues for self-improvement. I also hoped that my own story would help people understand how youngsters can go astray and how that can have devastating consequences not only for individuals, but for society as a whole. For every man or woman who goes to prison for a violent crime, there are victims that radiate outward like rings in a pond. There's the immediate victim of the crime. That's one circle of pain and loss. Then there are the friends and family of the victim, another circle of pain and loss. The third circle is the family of the criminal, from parents to siblings to spouse and children. Fourth, the taxpayers, who bear the burden of either warehousing or reforming prisoners. And finally, the outer ring, the fabric of society itself, which is harmed by fractured families, lost workers, and internal division. Now, to try to understand all this is not to excuse anyone for their bad acts or to shift blame to parents or society. But unless you can understand how problems arise, you can't fix them. And as a matter of self-preservation, each of us should care about trying to fix the crime problem. That said, I will turn to the reading. The Austrian philosopher Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves." I think that describes what goes on in the passage I will read. It's from chapter 2. The setting is death row at the Louisiana State Penitentiary. The time is when I arrived there in 1962. Most of you weren't even born then. Probably not your parents either. No other institution has so fueled the imagination of the Louisiana public as the Louisiana State Penitentiary, more popularly known as Angola, the name of the largest of several plantations merged at the turn of the century to create the institution. Its name conjures up a cacophony of horrors. It was called the Alcatraz of the South in 1939 by a New Orleans Sunday Item Tribune reporter. Its history, which has been written in the blood of those locked within its bowels, earned it infamy throughout the mid-20th century as the most intimidating prison in America. When deputies shackled me and put me in a car for the trip there on April 11, 1962, I feared the prison far more than my death sentence. After I'd been on the road for half an hour, my mind fastened on the passing landscape and I calmed down. Dead stalks of the previous season's sugarcane harvest filled mile after mile of flat fields. Cows roamed free in pastures. Overhead, an occasional flock of birds took flight, whirling and turning in unison, then settling in another tree. I envied them their freedom.